everybody. It's Allie, and welcome to our Y&R Chat for Sunday, May 17th, 2020. It was Rivals Week, and we had 5 classic episodes, and wait a minute, only 4 classic rivalries? Now, I hate to be a complainer because I am so grateful to be getting any episodes of Y&R at all, but why only 4 rivalries? Don't get me wrong, really. Jack and Victor's rivalry are it's epic, indeed, no doubt about it. I would say that Jack and Victor's rivalry is arguably the biggest rivalry on the show, and those episodes were awesome. I'm just being a little bit of a brat. And I'm kind of wishing that we could have mixed it up a little bit more, kept it fresh and exciting for every episode all week, and picked someone different for the 5th episode. I kind of had my heart set on maybe seeing an episode of Sheila versus Lauren. That would have really been good. Or even the time when Sheila was being played by Michelle Stafford. So it would have been 2 characters going at it who are even on the show today, right now. Or, I mean, you could have even done, Y&R, the episodes where Lauren was coming face to face with Sheila's twin sister. What was her name? Sarah. There was just so much I felt like could have been played on there. That is another epic rivalry that just seems missed. I was also thinking that maybe Phyllis and Drusilla's rivalry could have been highlighted, like the one where Phyllis and Drew were arguing and then Drew fell off the cliff forever. That might have been a good one to include. Or, hello, Phyllis and Sharon. Those 2 have been going at it for years and years. There would have been tons of episodes to pick from with those 2. Or, how about this? Instead of Jack and Victor, what about Adam and Victor? Now there is an epic rivalry, father and son going at it. It's just an odd choice to do 2 of the same rivalry when they didn't have to. There's plenty of content, plenty of rivalries. And I'm just realizing right now that I don't think we have seen a single classic episode in the past month where Adam is in it. None of our classic episodes have had any Adam. None of the 4 Adams have been in it. That's strange. Isn't it? Or is it a conspiracy? Oh. Well, I invite you to be a little bit of a brat along with me. And tell me, which classic rivalries did you think were maybe missing? Or were you happy with the 5 that they picked? YRChat.com is the website. And as promised, at the website, you can also vote in this week's poll, which is, what was your favorite of all of the rivalries that were highlighted? We had Victor and Jack, we had Katherie and Jill, we had Nikki and Sharon, and we had Hilary and Lily. Of those 4, which rivalry was your favorite? You can go to yrchat.com to cast your vote in that poll. And if you've listened to Y&R Chat at all over the past month, I think you're going to be able to guess how I'm going to vote in that poll. Look out, everybody! There are big, scary, hairy spiders and rats in the Chancellor Mansion's attic. Somebody needs to have a talk with Esther about her job performance in 1998. I sure hope that they were able to get that pest problem under control sometime within the next 20 years. Because I don't know if I can ever step foot in that house again. Knowing that that spider is somewhere in there? No. That place was filthy. But what a set. I had to really appreciate that attic set. And Y&R was filming it from really high. They had the camera positioned so that it was high above the set. And so you got the feeling that you were like in this pitched roof attic just looking down. Like it was a massive attic and you were just looking down at all of these things. You could even see the chimney right in the middle of the set. How cool was that? What a nice detail. Actually, it was kind of hard to see a lot of the details because it was so dark and so dusty. But you could see that there was like this beautiful antique clock up there. There was an antique lamp. And there were just boxes upon boxes upon boxes. One of my kind of unexplainably favorite moments of that day and that attic episode was when Jill was alone up there and she was rifling through all of the boxes. And Katherine had caught on to her, and Katherine had showed up in the background in the attic, but we could only hear Katherine's voice. We were mostly just seeing Jill's reaction to realizing that Katherine was up there, and then we cut to commercial, and as we were cutting to commercial, Gene Cooper was ad-libbing something in the background saying, the boxes! What are you doing up here with all of the boxes? And for some reason, it was tickling to me that Katherine would be so upset that Jill was up in the attic disturbing all of the boxes when it was clear that nobody had even been up there in the past 20 years. Oh Lord, don't touch any of Katherine's boxes. Although I'm sure she knew very well those were Philip's boxes, and that's exactly what Jill was doing up there. I don't know, I felt a little bad for Katherine because I knew right from the jump that Jill could totally kick her ass if she wanted to. Like in a knockdown drag out between Jill and Katherine, Jill is gonna win. And they did have a knockdown drag out, and Jill could have won. Oh, I think that Katherine totally deserved what she got. To be honest with you, Katherine had smacked Jill in the face like she was nothing. And then she was saying that Philip only used Jill like she was a common whore. Ouch! I mean, that is so inappropriate and so rude and so down and dirty. And frankly, I think Katherine had it coming. What Jill did next, which was pretty much jump on her and almost strangle the life out of her. I mean, to say something like that to Jill is the ultimate insult when Katherine knew that that wasn't true. I think that Katherine knew darn well that Philip loved Jill, and that's why Katherine hates Jill so much. And that's why Katherine hates herself so much. I think that Katherine was willing to kill herself and kill Philip in order to keep that relationship from happening. Katherine knows exactly what the score was. Ugh. But Jill really had her chance for revenge, didn't she? I mean, Jill could have easily squeezed the life right out of Katherine for saying that after they started to fight. And there was this really great moment where Jill actually had her hands around Katherine's neck, and she knew that she could seal the deal right here. All of the years that she's just probably fantasized about killing this woman, and now here she is, and the opportunity's right at the tips of her fingers. But Jill came to her senses, and she decided that she didn't want to win this way, but oh boy, she could have won. I am so glad that Y&R aired the attic episode. Can you even believe that I've been asking for it for 2 weeks in a row? And then here it is. I was asking for it during the Katherine Chancellor Tribute Week, and then I asked for it last week after we saw what had led up to it, when Katherine was inviting Jill to move into the mansion with her. So it was so serendipitous and so perfect, and I knew that you guys were going to be happy for me on the day that episode aired. But believe me, there was nobody more happy for me than me. That really kicked my week off on a good note. And Katherine and Jill ended up going to court over that house. What Jill found in the attic was a letter from Philip saying that he wanted her to have the mansion, and Katherine and Jill went to court over it in 1999, the following year after the attic fight. The judge ended up awarding them joint custody of the house, or joint ownership of the house, and rather than just selling the place and splitting the profits like any sane person would do, Katherine and Jill, sworn enemies, decided to just both live there together and drive each other crazy, which again made me a very happy girl because it was just all of the drama that I was wanting and needing. But all of that drama ended up making Katherine so despondent that she disappeared for a while. And she reappeared at a homeless shelter, of all places. And that homeless shelter was where she met the girl who would later, become known to be her granddaughter, Mackenzie. So, in that 1999 episode that we saw, Katherine had already figured out the truth that Mackenzie was her granddaughter, and she was arranging that surprise reveal for Mackenzie so that she could learn the truth too. That was a storyline that I really loved. I just thought that Katherine and Mac's personalities played really well against each other because, I don't know, Mac maybe seemed like a little bit of an old soul, and Katherine seems a little young at heart. So I thought that they went together really well. And it also brought back Brock back into the picture for a while, and you know how I feel about him. It also triggered Billy being cast on the show as a teen who was the same age as Mac, and it ignited that romantic interest between them, which also, by the way, gave Jill and Katherine something further to argue about. They didn't really want Katherine's granddaughter and Jill's son getting together, so that was a great time of Y&R. I really like this period of the show. I really like that storyline, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. I thought Jill was a lot of fun this week. I mean, say what you will about Jill, the woman was ahead of her time. She was there getting a full body massage in her office in the middle of the day. I mean, that woman knew how to get the job done. Wasn't Cameron Grimes an adorable little muffin in 1998? I normally don't develop specific affection for the child actors because we don't see much of them. It's rare that the child actors are actually given story and given reasons to connect with them, but Cassie was very different and unique in that way. So of course she had to die. They were like, this kid's adorable, let's kill her. We saw some scenes during the Nikki and Victor week last week where Nick was complaining to Grace about having this ready-made family when Cassie showed up on their doorstep, and he was not being very accepting of her. He had known that Sharon had a child previously, but when that child showed up out of the blue, spoiling his vision for his perfect little Newman family, he was such a jerk about it. And I don't think have a chance to talk about it last week because there's just so many stories that are getting thrown at once. I can't possibly cover them all, but I did want to make sure to mention this week that it was an evolution of that relationship that we got to see on screen, because Nick did not really accept Cassie at first, but he did eventually come to love her, and he did eventually come to treat her as nothing less than his own flesh and blood. And in fact, Cassie and Nick became incredibly close. That was his little girl. I mean, when she was bouncing into the scene, just so happy, asking if they could have a barbecue that night. I mean, this was such a different world to her, and she really loved being part of their little family, and Cassie was always something that brought Nick and Sharon back together. And Victor doted on Cassie, too. I remember feeling that Victor's tenderness with Cassie was something that made me feel very endeared to Victor. She was just, it was kind of an Annie story. It was a real rags to riches thing going on. And this little child, this sweet little child came into the picture and really lightened up and brightened up a lot of things in this world. And it really worked. I've always been a fan of the Annie story, so maybe that's why I loved it so much. Now, Grace was always a real problem for Nick and Sharon, so all of those looks of concern that Sharon was given to the camera on Monday, they were warranted. Grace wanted Nick, and Grace would have stopped at nothing to get Nick. Grace was working with Nick, trying real hard to get her promotions, and Grace was just plotting out ways that she could be alone with Nick, that she could steal Nick from Sharon, who was her best friend, and in fact, Grace did manage to steal Nick away from Sharon, her best friend, a couple of times. I'm going to forget to say this elsewhere, so I'm just going to say it here. I loved Nikki's short hair. There were a couple of episodes where she just had this short, bouncy haircut, and I think that haircut would look really good on her today. It kind of makes me want to cut my hair, seeing how cute her hair was in the 90s. Oh, yeah, there's just so many fashion notes for everyone. I have to keep myself focused or I'm gonna jet off into fashion note world and not get onto the stories. But it is actually really cool how Y&R has tied a lot of these classic episodes and these stories together, because last week we saw Nikki in the hospital on her deathbed after she had the wedding to Victor, and he was putting the makeup on her face. But then this week we saw what happened after that, which was Diane contesting that marriage. It was 1998. Now, Victor told Diane, oh no, Nikki's gonna die, I gotta marry her, so can you please grant me a temporary divorce? And Diane granted the temporary divorce, and last week we saw Victor reassuring Diane that it was only temporary. But Victor decided that temporary needed to become permanent, and he wanted to stay married to Nikki. So this week we saw Diane working with Michael to contest the divorce, and although she was never able to regain Victor's love and affection and wedding ring, Diane got two key things out of the divorce settlement in 98. Yeah, I think it was. Number one, Diane got a seat on the board of directors at Newman Enterprises. Now that's gonna become something that's a little more important a little bit later. But number two, Diane managed to get herself a sample of Victor's prize sperm when all of that went down. Oh yes, that's right. Diane learned that Victor just so happened to have a frozen sperm sample being stored. Does that sound familiar, by the way, from like last week with Ashley, when Ashley was revealing Abby's paternity to her in that camcorder confession? Yes, that's right. I mean, this happened to Victor twice. Someone stealing his sperm and at least trying to inseminate themselves with it. It worked with Ashley and Abby, but it did not work with Diane Jenkins because Nikki found out about Diane's little plan, and Nikki switched the sperm totally unbeknownst to Diane. So Diane gave birth to her son, who she named Christian Victor Newman. And it was only later that Diane found out that Victor wasn't really the father. She didn't successfully get Victor's sperm. The person whose sperm she actually got was Jack Abbott. And that child was later renamed Kyle. So Nikki was able to do an end run around Diane Jenkins. I would say that's a big time score 1 for Nikki. And actually, there was also a big time score 2 for Nikki when later Nikki got her final revenge on Diane. I think it was about 2011 when Nikki killed her. And now that board seat comes into play. That board seat that Michael was able to help Diane maneuver in the divorce settlement in 1998. That played a key role in Jack and Brad's Newman Enterprises takeover in 1999. While Nikki and Victor decided to go away on a romantic vacation, Jack and Brad held a secret board vote and got themselves elected as co-CEOs. And Victor was out of touch. And when he finally did get back in touch and realized what was going on, he tried to make his way back to Genoa City to stop it. But before he could do that, his jet went down and crashed into the New Mexico mountains. Can you believe it? Soaps were a lot like that back in the day. The character was just about to get to stop whatever was going on, and then something else would stop them. So Victor's jet goes down in New Mexico. I think we heard him mention that in the epic argument with Jack. And Victor was found, and he was nursed back to health by a man named Chet. Well, when Chet found out that the man he found was Victor Newman, his plans changed. He realized that Victor Newman was the man who had stole or bought up and crushed his family company a whole lot of years ago. So once again, just as it seems like Victor's getting better and he's going to get back to Genoa City to stop what's going on with Jack and Brad, Chet switches gears and decides he's actually going to hold Victor hostage. It was like you would get 1 step forward and 2 steps back with soaps in these days. I can't say I miss that. I do sort of like that the action moves rather quickly, but I think maybe we lose a lot in the process. I guess it's apples and oranges. So Victor's now in New Mexico being held by Chet, but don't worry, because of course there was a beautiful woman. Of course, beautiful woman who is the girlfriend of Chet. She's just so enthralled by Victor that she decided to come along and help Victor. She was wanting to thwart Chet's plans, help Victor escape. Her name was Ramona. Oh, she was so beautiful, so sultry, so sexy. She was so beautiful, in fact, that she later returned to Genoa City with Victor and made Nikki so jealous over it that Nikki turned around and slept with Brad. Oh. Brad was always kind of a secondary foe for Victor, though. I mean, really, Victor's rage was focused on Jack more than anything else. And even though Jack and Brad were both involved in the Newman Enterprises takeover plan, Jack was the one who was making himself very comfy in that CEO chair in 1999. He even had that snazzy oil portrait of he and Brad up on the wall, standing there side by side, best buds forever, like a memento to commemorate their coup. And oh boy, that confrontation scene between Jack and Victor was incredible. I thought that both Eric Braeden and Peter Bergman were so good. They were both equally good. I think that is one of my favorite confrontations between them because both Jack and Victor had their say. Both of them. It seems like in a lot of the feuds between Jack and Victor, Victor's usually the victor. You know, Victor's usually the one who wins, and Jack limps away with egg on his face. But in that scene in 1999, I felt like Jack got to have his say. Jack got to say how Victor stole his family company. So don't be looking to Jack for any sympathy when Jack stole Victor's. This was Jack's ultimate payback to Victor. This was Jack's sweetest revenge. And you could really feel Peter Bergman hamming it up as Jack was just tasting it and enjoying it and reveling in it. And he won. This was a win for Jack because Victor did eventually agree to sell Gibault back to the Abbotts in exchange for getting Newman Enterprises back. So that storyline was a complete victory for Jack, and it made Victor furious. He was so furious that someone could get the better of him. He was so furious, in fact, that he walked over to that portrait of Jack and Brad that was hanging on the wall, and he pulled it down and he raised it up and he smashed it into 100 different pieces. It was like he was a wrestler in that moment. He grabbed the portrait, smashed it, and said, "I will crush you!" It was such a wrestling moment. "I will crush you!" But then he stood up straight and he brushed off his jacket, made sure he was still looking good. He pulled himself together, said, "Okay, wait a minute, I'm not a wrestler, I'm Victor Newman, I'm classy." So he brushed his jacket and then limped back over to Jack. I'm pretty sure he had still an injury that he was nursing and that's why he was limping. But he kind of limps back over to Jack after smashing the portrait. And Jack's just sitting there in the chair, letting Victor have his epic tantrum. And Victor then picks up a pencil from the desk, snaps it in half, and again says, "I will crush you!" It was another wrestler moment. It was such a wrestling trick. Just snap, "I will crush you!" But then he pulls himself together. He literally takes one hand through one side of his hair, the other hand through the other side of his hair, make sure he's still looking good, and then walks out the door. You know, you gotta have composure after your epic tantrum. Oh my goodness, I loved that. That was so good. I thought that Eric Braeden's performance was so powerful there. I just wish they would have given him something more powerful to crush than a pencil. October 1st, 1993. Victor returns from Hope's farm in Kansas, returns from the dead, and reveals to his family and his friends and his foes that he is still alive. He's just been in Kansas baling hay and sipping lemonade all summer long. This was probably my first ever big reveal episode. I had been watching Young and the Restless for the first time all that summer long. I was home from school on summer break. I was 13 years old, and I remember coming home from school in the fall, watching this episode on my VHS recording. I remember also the colonnade room reveal very, very vividly, where Victor had sent the mysterious invitation to all of the lesser people, like the main confrontations that Y&R wanted to focus on, Jack and Nikki. Those came later, but there was a big reveal at the colonnade room where I remember Douglas was there and Victor just stepped out of the shadows. It was so insane. It was just insane. I would really like to go back and see that episode too, because that one's even more vivid in my mind. I just remember being it took my breath away. It's the reveal that made me a lifelong Y&R fan. So you have to give me a little bit of leeway on this one. It was my first. It was a very emotional episode for me to watch this week. And it's not so much because of the content. It's because I traveled back in time. I mean, I was there. It was 1993 and I was a teenager and I'm watching this show and just being in awe of it and just knowing that this is cool. This is cool and I'm hooked. I know a lot of people have said at various points in these episodes airing, the classic episodes airing, that they've had a moment where they're just transported in time. I think Lisa left a comment at the website this week saying that she was watching and remembering being pregnant with her daughter. It's like there's just something about these episodes airing, whether it's the content or not, you just time travel. And it's just this really incredible, cool thing to get to experience, especially in the midst of, something that is not positive, to have a positive moment. Like, oh, wow, the airing of these classic episodes has really given me something that I needed, that I didn't even know that I needed, and that I really, really value. This was my week. This was just my week, that 1993 episode. And Hope, sitting there quietly at Victor's penthouse as Victor was reuniting with his children. I remember that too. And Victoria was really, really on to what was really happening between the lines there, wasn't she? Like, I think that whether Victoria ever admitted it or not, she knew that Hope was a threat. And I just think that Victoria wanted her happy family with her happy mom and her happy dad and Nicholas, all of them to be together. And she didn't like that Hope was there. And Victoria did try to, in that episode, question Victor a little bit about Hope's presence. And I mean, she was direct with Victor about it too. Like, Heather Tom's Victoria was not afraid to stand up to Victor and to ask him hard questions. Even in her youth, she was often defiant with him. And I kind of miss that Victoria. That's something that I've realized coming out of these classic episodes. I miss the Victoria that wasn't always just trying to please Victor. I miss the Victoria that was challenging him, because there aren't enough people in Victor's life who challenge him. He gets away with nearly everything every time. So I just did appreciate that moment with a young Victoria. I think also it's worth noting that Victoria didn't like Hope from the jump, and she damn well didn't like Adam from the jump either. I think Victoria, just that look on Heather Tom's Victoria's face seeing Hope, she knew something about this she didn't like, and she never liked it, not for the next decades. But I do remember that moment of Victor sitting there with his children and just being so happy to be there with them. But he didn't even let it last too long, because Victor had this series of spies calling him and Douglas, just so that Victor could perfectly time a fascinatingly slow reveal of him being alive to his number one best enemy, Jack Abbott. Jack had taken over Newman Enterprises while Victor was at the farm, presumed dead. And indeed, it's true. Victor knew about it all along. All summer long, Victor was standing there in Hope's kitchen listening to the news reports about his death, and he was listening to the news reports about what was happening to his company. And yet he stood there. He knew his family thought he was dead. He knew that Jack Abbott had taken over his company, and yet he stood there all summer long in Hope's kitchen, choosing to do nothing. I think it was John Abbott who was saying in a scene from that episode, talking to Jill, how could a man let his family think that he was dead? He had to have known what was going on. And John was right. But the interesting thing is, because I picked up watching while Victor was at Hope's farm, I only knew Victor's perspective on it. I had nothing else to go on other than Victor's narrative that everyone in his life back in Genoa City were ungrateful for him, and he was just wanting to get away from all of their pressures upon him. And I think that probably did inform my opinion of Victor fundamentally forever. He was my first introduction. I never knew anything but. But in retrospect, listening to even just John saying that in the episode, just how could he do that? It's sick. It's true. I mean, I'm looking at it as an adult and thinking, how could you possibly do that to your children? Because Victor knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly that he was going to return someday. I think Victor was, just as he said, he was embracing the farm life. He was embracing Hope physically. And knowing him now, he was just biding his time. He was just waiting for the perfect reveal. I mean, Hope was urging Victor to return for months. It's worth noting that Victor said to him daily, you need to talk to your family. You need to let them know that you're okay. And he wouldn't do it until he was good and ready. And then when he was ready, oh boy. I think that in a lot of ways, like, his love for his family and his children just took a back seat to knowing that he was going to bring down the hammer on Jack Abbott. I think the rivalry with Jack is number one, and everything else is number two. That he would lay the groundwork of this just manipulative return, the invite to everyone, hoping that he could do his big reveal there. But when that didn't work out, showing up in the office so that he could give Jack the shock of his life. I mean, Jack strolls into Victor's office like it's any other day, and like it's his office, because at that point, Victor's office is Jack's office. And it was odd that Jack had chosen to replace Victor's portrait with like a Rembrandt or something. There was some unnamed classic looking painting on the wall. It was just, it felt odd to see not a portrait on the wall there. And Jack immediately goes right to the bar, pours himself a drink, and then another. And then he walks over to his table and he looks at that colonnade room invitation that he received. He calls Nikki about it, wants to find out what it was all about. And when she didn't know, because she wasn't there either, Jack decides to flirt with Nikki a little bit. He arranges a date later. And all of the while, Victor is sitting there with the chair swiveled in the opposite direction, listening to everything that Jack is saying and doing. And I think that I just love to imagine what was going through Victor's mind in that moment. Like, because he was sitting there for probably a good 10 minutes just listening to what was going on, and he was just waiting until he sensed that it was the right timing. Maybe there was like the perfect silence in the room, and just when Jack had kind of caught a sense that maybe there was someone else in the room, or there was something was awry in the force field. Jack walks toward the desk, and Victor turns around in the chair at like -20 miles per hour. It was the slowest chair turn that I have ever seen, and yet it was so smooth and so creepy. Victor never even turned his head. He just kept his head aligned with the chair and just swiveled around so that you could see the profile, his stiff neck. Like, he knew that he was trying to make it as terrifying as possible. He knew that he was going to give Jack the most epic face reveal ever. I think Victor probably wanted Jack to have a heart attack in that moment. Victor wanted to watch Jack squirm in that moment. And Jack kind of staggered back. He had to blink his eyes a few times, and he just stood there with his mouth hanging wide open while that episode faded to black. What a cliffhanger. That is the definition of a cliffhanger. That was the definition of an epic reveal. I will never forget it as long as I live. That image of Jack's face with his mouth hanging open as the scene faded to black. There was probably also some sweat forming on his forehead. Somebody hand this man a silk scarf so that he can dab the sweat off of his forehead, please. Brad and Lauren were so hot together. They were so sizzling hot together. Man, I mean, I could easily have gotten on board with a forever Lauren and Brad relationship, but maybe it was too much hotness for one relationship. Maybe. He was working at Fenmore's briefly, and like back when Fenmore's was an actual place in town, when they had offices. I mean, there was a point when they had stores and boutiques. But in that 1993 scene, Lauren was trying to woo Brad to come work at Fenmore's more permanently, and it was clear that Lauren was interested in more than just his business acumen. But she was married to Scott at the time. So what was up with that? Their marriage must have been falling apart, and Scott died in 1993. In fact, I must have seen Scott's death, and it just didn't register because I was definitely watching it this time. But I just don't remember Scott dying. I don't remember much of him at all. He must have died right after this. So I'm kind of wondering if maybe in 93, when Lauren is trying to woo Brad to Fenmore's, I wonder if that was when Scott was hiding his terminal illness from her. I'm not sure. Maybe there's a Scott expert out there who can let me know. But speaking of illnesses, also in that 1993 episode, Olivia was revealing to Nathan that, surprise, she had brought his crazy mother-in-law home to live with them. I guess I shouldn't say that, because the mother, from what I remember, was suffering from clinical depression, and I don't remember specifically what it was, but I do remember that the mother was very bizarre. She had a lot of weird behaviors, and she was definitely causing problems for Olivia and Nathan. Eventually, Olivia and Drew's father came to take her away. It was a little short-lived, I guess, but yeah, sort of brief but weird. 1993, that was Nathan number 2 of 3, by the way. That was my first Nathan. We saw Nathan number 1 right in the beginning, working at the detective agency with Paul. Nathan number 2 is what we saw there in that scene between he and Olivia. I think that was the one I liked best. I tend to like my first blush impressions of a character, so I think that would have been my favorite Nathan actor. Nathan number 3, they revamped the character and he became something quite different. But yeah, I liked that scene. I didn't realize that Drew and Olivia's mother's name, it was Lily Bell. Isn't that adorable? Lily Bell was her name. So Drew and Neil must have named their daughter after her mother. So that must be where Lily's name comes from, which is interesting because from my understanding, Drusilla had a really tough relationship with her mother. I think Drusilla always felt that the mother had given preferential treatment to Olivia, and I think we've seen a lot of evidence of that. You know, I wanted to make sure to mention this week, and I'm sure I'll have more opportunities next week, Olivia was a really good, solid character. Olivia was the total opposite of her sister, Drusilla. And although Drew was probably the more exciting sister, I think that Olivia's sensibility was really underappreciated by me at the time. Olivia was an overall good person, I think, for the most part. But what I like most about her and rewatching her is that she was a straight shooter. She wasn't afraid to tell you exactly what she thought. And there wasn't a lot of the glitz and a lot of the flamboyance that you get with Drusilla, but she was just honest. She was just forthright. Although she did have one little character flaw. She was pretty much always fighting her feelings for her sister's husband the entire time. It's funny because Drew was so jealous of Olivia in the early days that she received all of the attention from the family and she had gone on to have this successful career. And yet, Olivia was pining for Drusilla's husband. I mean, Olivia was pining for Neil for a long time. Even Malcolm knew it. And in fact, that's part of the reason that Malcolm was so coarse with her and like hung up the phone on her when he was having that conversation in Jill's office in the 1999 episode. Olivia and Malcolm tried really hard to make that marriage work, but on some level, I think they were a little bit of a mismatch. And maybe they were both always in love with someone else. It was like they just went together because, all right, well, you know, we got the 2 sisters and the 2 brothers together. But it didn't quite ever jive with me, Olivia and Malcolm. Although I like when there's opposite personalities in a relationship because Olivia was very straightforward and Malcolm was very, like, hip and cool. But Drew and Malcolm would have made a little more sense, and that did happen, but yeah, not under good circumstances. We'll get to that later. Maybe. I don't know. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned Olivia because she's gone from the show, but she's not forgotten, and she was not in the Christoph St. John Memorial episodes, which was a little bit sad. But I liked her, and I have a feeling that we're going to be seeing more of her next week because next week's theme is the Winters family. Yay! I was really pleased to see a preview. I saw like a few scenes to set my expectations of some things that the episodes that we're going to be airing. Looks like there's going to be some focus on Neil and Drew meeting each other and falling in love. There's going to be some focus on Devon and him being incorporated into the family. I think there's going to be a lot of Neil and Drew and Malcolm and Devon, which is really cool. I'm really looking forward to the whole thing, but the thing I'm looking forward to the most, I cannot wait to see the lion cage episode. That is gonna be fun. Can you even imagine Y&R springing for a lion these days? I mean, we're lucky if we could get a wedding. Can you imagine them bringing in a tamed lion to do a scene? Oh, I don't think so. But I know that scene was really impactful to young Brighton James, and I believe that Shamar Moore also has a really a strong fondness for lions. So I think that this was an episode that was really near and dear to the actor's heart. So, and I haven't seen it in a really long time. I mean, maybe little tiny clips of it, but I cannot wait to see that full episode. That is going to be a highlight of my week next week. come to think of it, we also saw Olivia in Nikki and Victor's 2002 wedding episode last Friday. Olivia was there with Ashley feeling sick and also right before she was getting ready to reveal Abby's paternity. But Olivia was also a good friend. She was a good friend to Ashley. I always enjoyed their connection, so that was nice to see again. And in that 1993 Victor Reveal Alive episode, Brenda Epperson, her version of Ashley, beautiful Brenda Epperson, was reacting to the news that Victor was still alive, but she was also just kicking off that relationship and eventual marriage to Blade. Oh man, now there's a blast from the past. Blade. I just never liked Blade, to be honest with you. I've always had something against those like characters who are named weirdly, like Ridge and Thorn. I mean, it's kind of like Thorn. I've come to love Ridge, but like Thorn, and I don't like those sort of like Harlequin romance novel type names for the guy. It just doesn't work for me. And his full name was Blade Bladeson. Blade Bladeson. I mean, come on. How was I supposed to take him seriously? Blade Bladeson about freaking sums it up for me. I'm sorry. I am really sorry, but I could not help but be rolling my eyes at him. Somebody at Y&R must have really liked him, though, because they killed off Blade's character and brought him back as an evil twin. Rick. I much preferred Rick. I much preferred Rick because he just had a normal name. An actual human being name. Blade Bladeson, it irks me. It gets up under my skin and bothers me in the same way that it bothers me when people call Chance Chancellor. It's too soap opera-y. It just, I don't like it. Blade Bladeson. Ugh. Not to mention more scarves. I don't know what it is, me and men with scarves, but Blade had his little scarf. He had on a button-up shirt and then like a scarf around his neck. It just wasn't, I don't know. But it makes sense to me why Ashley would be attracted to him. There are a lot of men who wear scarves in her life in this period of time. I don't ever remember seeing, I was alive in the late 80s and early 90s, and I do not ever remember seeing a man in a scarf. Unless it's like, even, I don't know, maybe it's just me and where I'm from, but even like in the winter, guys don't really wear scarves. Let alone silk scarves as a fashion accent. Oh my gosh, I don't know. Maybe everybody should get into scarves a little more. I need to open myself up. But Blade just wasn't doing it for me. I much preferred Ashley's relationship with Brad, and they were married for a good long while. I loved that scene at the restaurant. I'm thinking it might have been Gina's. Brad and Eileen Davidson's Ashley were like snarking back and forth at each other over, it was, I think, the 1999 episode where Jack and Brad had their takeover plan for Newman Enterprises while Victor was in New Mexico. Was that Gina's restaurant? It was very dark. It had those cloth curtains that separated the booths. It looked different. And did you notice how many people there were in that scene? I mean, the restaurant was full. And they must have had a lot of extras in there. That was also a very large set. But I think it was Gina's. There was a neon light I could see in the front of the window, which is kind of cool. Like seeing a window. We don't even see that. Well, I guess Society has a window. But I don't know. Maybe somebody can tell me. Is that your memory of Gina's? Also, just, I'm tangenting again, but we certainly did see a whole lot of the Genoa City Athletic Club in the Friday episode from 2014. It was all GCAC for a whole lot of years. I missed it a little bit, maybe, that revolving door, but more importantly, I loved Ashley in that 1990 scene. Maybe it was Gina's, maybe not. I loved Ashley and Brad sitting there together, snarking at each other, and I especially loved Ashley's look. She was so beautiful in that scene. Ashley was looking like Madonna in the Express Yourself video. I could not keep my eyes off of her. Eileen Davidson's Ashley had this beautiful pinned up hairdo. It was kind of curly in the back, and she was wearing a black pinstripe women's business suit. All she needed was a monocle. On Wednesday, my local episode was preempted for news. So I had to go to the CBS.com website that night to watch the show. And the first thing I noticed on the CBS.com video was this little text notice in the upper left-hand corner that said, coarse language and violence. So this was part of the rating for the episode, and it said coarse language and violence. And I thought to myself, wait, what? Coarse language and violence? This is Y&R. Well, in retrospect, I guess it was rather violent the way Sharon held Nikki's head under a bucket of water. And I guess the language was pretty coarse when Nikki trotted into the stables with Sharon's brand new gift of a horse from her new husband / ex-father-in-law. And Nikki said to Sharon, I didn't think you'd mind if I rode him first. That sort of thing doesn't seem to bother you. I can't get it out of my head. Now I'm just imagining Nikki and or Sharon writing Victor. No! But hands down, the greatest line that has basically ever come out of anyone's mouth on The Young and the Restless. I didn't think you'd mind if I wrote him first. That sort of thing doesn't seem to bother you. I mean, I was so taken aback. It was an absolute shock of a moment. That line was probably a bigger shock to me than any of the Victor and Jack fights, because I could have seen any of those coming. But just the way that line slid out of Nikki's mouth, it literally blew me back. Ugh, ew. Them fighting over Victor's so ew. Sharon and Nikki also both seemed kind of drunk in that scene. I mean, they looked like they were having fun, but they also seemed a little loose and a little drunk, especially Nikki. Nikki could have been drunk at that point. I guess I can't really blame her. It was, that whole period of time was so unfortunate. It was 2012 when Sharon was married to Victor, and it just makes me cranky to even think about it, so I can completely understand why Nikki was a little cranky, maybe a little saucy over it. Oh, whoever thought that was a good idea? Who specifically was it that thought it was a good idea to have Sharon and Victor get married? And if it was 2012, is there any possibility that it was our current writer, Josh Griffith? Because he was writing the show at that time too. It was such a miss. I mean, thumbs up on the stable fight, but thumbs down on the absolutely horrid marriage between Victor and Sharon. The biggest problem with the Sharon and Victor marriage, aside from the fact that they used to be father and daughter-in-law, and it completely ruined that special relationship of theirs completely for the rest of forever. Like, Sharon and Victor's relationship and connection were never the same after the marriage. But the biggest problem of it all was just that simply there was no romance. It was never played for romance. Victor was in jail protecting Nikki from Diane Jenkins' murder charges by saying that he was the one that killed Diane. And he only married Sharon to push Nikki away so that Nikki wouldn't figure the whole thing out, that she was the one that killed Diane. And then after Victor got out of jail, for some reason, he felt compelled to just kind of go through with the marriage with Sharon for a while, and she just said, all right, and they just kept staying married for a little while before the whole thing got annulled, and it was just awful. There was no love, and that marriage destroyed any non-romantic love that they ever had. Ugh. That's like the worst period of time of Y&R. One of the worst periods of time for Y&R. I did appreciate Victor's hard-nosed approach, though, to letting Sharon and Nikki get arrested after the fight. We were just talking about that. Sometimes you just gotta let those children sit in jail, right, Mamie? Am I right? I mean, Victor even went to Michael Baldwin to make sure that Sharon and Nikki would sit in jail for a little while at least to cool off, like they were two schoolgirls who got sent to detention. So he went to the district attorney and said, you just keep these two kids in class after school. Yeah, I think that when the stable fight happened, it was obviously after Victor had gotten out of jail, but I don't think that Nikki yet knew that she was the one who had killed Diane. So I think that Nikki was still puzzled about that awful, twisted marriage. So I guess it's understandable why Nikki felt the need to douse Sharon in baking soda. Hey! Maybe she saved some of the leftovers. Maybe she decided a couple decades later to use it in her famous lemon cake recipe. Ricky Williams was the bomb. Get it? Because Paul thought that Ricky had planted a bomb in Heather's apartment. I'm proud of myself on that one, I'm just saying. But it's true. Ricky Williams was the bomb. Ricky Williams was one of the most epic and sexy villains that we have had on this show in modern Y&R history. I never understood why they killed him off. And they never found a body. So I will always be holding out hope that he will have a return someday. Ugh. Peter Port. That part was well cast and it was well played. Ricky was the son of Paul and the incomparable and infamous Isabella. We saw her at Nikki and Victor's wedding last Friday in 2002. And Ricky was pure evil. I think that's part of the reason why I loved him so much. He was just pure, sinister evil. But can you even imagine if Y&R would have taken the time to write a redemption story for him? He would be one of the biggest hunks on the show right now. That guy could out-Adam Adam. I am telling you, Ricky and Adam would have either made a formidable team or an epic rivalry that would have been worthy of having a whole theme week of its own. I mean, they could have been really great together. I mean, Ricky was great on his own. Doug Davidson was good in this story too. And that's really, really another element that carried it hardcore for me, because you could feel Paul's love for his son, and you could feel him little by little over the course of weeks and months starting to come to the conclusion that his son, who he wanted to believe, who he wanted to have a relationship with, was a psychopath, just like his mother. I mean, that heartbreaking realization that his son was just as psychotic as his mother. But the real twist of genius in this story that I don't think anybody realized was coming was the fact that, like, Paul was starting to see what was going on with Ricky, but nobody else was really seeing it. Like, so to the outside world, Paul looked like his suspicions of his son were getting the better of him. So Ricky, because he was so good at his manipulations and what he was doing, he was starting to make Paul look like he was going crazy. And Paul didn't know. I mean, it just threw so much into question. And the story ended up culminating with Paul having to decide, like, am I right? Do I trust myself? Or do I trust what everybody else is telling me? Do I trust what Ricky is telling me? The story culminated in Paul having to make the heartbreaking choice to shoot his son. He was, Ricky had a knife. It was coming to a head, and Ricky had a knife to Eden Baldwin's throat. And Paul had to make a decision to save Eden's life and shoot Ricky. And so Paul did. Paul shot Ricky. Ricky got blasted back. He went crashing through a window. He fell down onto the street below and he died, but I will never believe he's dead. Not ever, ever, ever. That character is ripe for a comeback. And I have only been saying that for what, 8 years now? Another villain who I thought was excellent, Daisy. For some reason, the fans hated her. And they were especially cruel to the actress, saying that she couldn't act, but I thought she was wonderful. She was giving me kind of an evil Gwen Stefani vibe, and I loved it. I also loved that Daisy's story was kind of paralleling the Phyllis story at the point where we were dropping in this week's episode. She was trapping Daniel into a marriage and a baby, although I believe that Lucy is Daniel's biological child. But it was an interesting full circle moment, since that same scenario that was happening to Daniel also happened to his father, Danny Romalotti, all those years ago. It was an interesting tie-in, and I wonder if that's part of the reason that Phyllis particularly hated Daisy. She saw something of herself in Daisy. But also Daisy was scheming with Ricky the entire time, and also to get dirt on Phyllis to write an expose article. And of course, Phyllis was blaming Daisy for not helping her during her miscarriage, and I'm pretty sure that Phyllis was right about that. That and so many other things made Daisy hated not just by the fans, but hated by Nick and Daniel and Michael. And we saw that scene where Nick and Daniel and Michael were sitting there at the athletic club saying, "Oh, we all hate Daisy so much. I wish we could get rid of her." And it really seemed like Y&R was gearing up for a Who Killed Daisy plot. Everyone wanted Daisy gone, and then one day she just disappeared. She had an altercation with Ricky, and Ricky later claimed that he was the one who killed her, but it kind of happened without any fanfare. It was just sort of like, all right, voila, everybody got their wish. Daisy's gone. I have always disliked Mary Williams. From day one that I ever met her, I disliked her. And anytime that you've heard me talk about Mary Williams, I guarantee that I was talking with annoyance. She was such a busybody, and she was just never doing a whole lot other than being nosy or showing up at Paul's apartment with some spare ribs and sauerkraut, or this time it was a pot roast. I never could connect with her. But I must be getting old, or sentimental, or something. Maybe all of these classic episodes are unearthing something in me, but I realized when I was watching the 1999 episode that, Mary Williams was just a woman of her time. And that wasn't really represented on the show outside of her. Mary was traditional. Mary wanted a nice wife for her son who would share her interests, who she could connect with over cooking or whatever it may be. And Mary wanted a grandchild. She just wanted a nice wife for her son and a grandchild to toddle around. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that on a level, maybe that's what Paul wanted too. I mean, I think probably in another time and place, Paul would have been perfectly happy to settle down with Lynn and have children. But it broke my heart to see those scenes where Chris was breaking the bad news to Paul that they were not going to be having a baby. They were not going to be starting their family. And I think that it's unfortunate that they never really did. I mean, here at the end of that episode, they're accepting that they weren't pregnant, but saying, well, we'll try again. We're going to do it again. And they never really did. I think that Paul and Chris found themselves over the years in a situation that a lot of couples and a lot of people find themselves in. You get really focused on your career, and little by little you just don't make the time to try to start a family. A family is very time consuming, and so whether consciously or unconsciously, both Paul and Chris chose each other. They chose their careers, and there's nothing wrong with that either. I think it's really cool that Paul and Chris were together in that 1999 episode, and they are together today in 2020. Yeah. I don't know if I think that someone has mentioned this before. I don't think it was my idea. But I do kind of think that a foster care storyline would be something really interesting to see for Paul and Christine right now. Not that everyone has to have kids in any way, but I think it might be good for the plot. I think it might be an interesting way to bring Paul and Chris back into the fold, especially since we know that Doug Davidson was not very happy about the fact that he hadn't been given any new scripts. Why not give Paul and Chris a foster care storyline right now? I think it would be the perfect timing. I mean, we could create a brand new character who can continue on the Williams legacy. Lily and Hilary's rivalry is a good, solid pick for rivalries week. I mean, those two were going at it until the day that Hilary died. Which begs the obvious question here. Why not air the episode where Lily and Hilary were in the car fighting so hard and so much that Lily took her eyes off the road and got into the car accident that killed Hilary? That would have been the episode to pick to represent that rivalry. I don't understand why they didn't do that. Why didn't Y&R do that? I mean, the 2014 episode where Lily was giving Hilary the rude awakening with the pitcher of ice water, it was awesome. It was a lot of water, too. It was no small amount of water. It was good. But it was over in about the first 10 minutes of the episode, and then Lily and Hilary were only arguing for the next 10 minutes of the episode. Like, Lily and Hilary were done arguing by the halfway point of the show. That episode had more rivalry between Victor and Ian Ward than it did between Lily and Hilary. I don't get it. It's my only beef. My two beefs are why not? My two beefs with the week are why not 5 different rivalries and why pick that episode for Lily and Hilary. I mean, at least they could have also picked... Yeah, hang on a minute. Because they also could have picked the episode where Lily and Kane had locked Hilary in Devon's office in order to prevent her from going to the fertility appointment. At least that was a whole episode of Lily and Hilary arguing through the door. I don't get this pick. I don't get this pick. We did get some good Neil scenes. I mean, that's a bonus. I thought Neil was looking especially sexy there. And Kane too, by the way. But, I mean, the first half of the episode was Lily and Kane arguing, and the second half of the episode, was Lily and Hilary arguing, and the second part of the episode was Neil and Hilary deciding that they loved each other. And I guess I don't feel like I ever felt that big time chemistry between Neil and Hilary. It was always a little weird to me that Devon was clearly in love with her too, and the father-son triangle was just too icky. I don't know why Y&R didn't keep Leslie around and let Leslie hook up with Neil on a more permanent basis. I mean, we saw Leslie this week, and Neil was commenting in the episode about how heartbroken he was about that relationship. And I don't know, I think that could have been something. Y&R could have developed around Leslie. I mean, Leslie wasn't the most exciting character. Maybe she fell into the boring attorney role a little bit too much. Sort of like Avery Bailey Clark. I think that when you're the town lawyer, I think you get pigeonholed a little bit, and the show doesn't necessarily give you a lot of story, but there's no reason that Y&R couldn't have given Leslie a little bit of a wild side or filled in a little bit of blanks on her personality, given her something aside from the law that would have made her compelling and would have made her light Neil's flame. They could have made her a jazz singer or a fan of jazz or something. There was an infinite number of tie-ins, but especially because Neil wanted to be with her. And instead, Leslie ended up disappearing for a few weeks and then coming back into town married to some nameless off-screen someone else. Tyler was Leslie's brother, and although I remember liking him well enough, I think in retrospect he was almost too pretty. You know what I mean? Like, he's so gorgeous and so perfect that every time I see him, that's all I can see. Like, Tyler's beauty was so blinding that I just couldn't connect with him emotionally. Oh, but I had forgotten what a bizarre entrance Mariah's character had in Genoa City. She was stalking Tyler while he was dating and I think engaged to Abby. And Tyler was revealing in that episode from 2014 that Mariah had slept with his boss in order to get him out of some theft charges that she was responsible for, and he didn't find out about it until later. I mean, wow, that sounds a lot different from the Mariah that we see on a daily basis now. Mariah has come a long way. She gained a whole lot of acceptance in Genoa City. Probably simply because she was Sharon's daughter. Because we can't forget, and Nikki also mentioned in the episode, that Victor was paying Mariah to haunt Sharon, to pretend to be Cassie, Sharon's dead daughter, her twin sister, in order to drive Sharon insane. Sharon must have been going through it quite a lot anyway during that time, because we had those scenes where Sharon was trying to figure out her own secret. Sharon was trying to figure out something that she had done. And at first I thought that the secret that Sharon was keeping, that she had been hypnotized and electroshocked into trying to remember. I thought the secret was about Sully and Sage, because we also had Dylan in that episode, and I don't know, I was just thinking maybe that's where we were in the time period, but I guess that must have come much later, because in 1999, the secret that Sharon was keeping was that she had switched Summer's paternity test results to make it look like Nick wasn't Summer's father, that it was Jack, that Jack was Summer's father. Sharon. Week after week, classic episode after classic episode, it's just Sharon. Sharon thought that the best way to secure her relationship with Nick and keep Phyllis away from Nick was to just switch Summer's paternity test results and to make Nick think that his daughter wasn't his. Makes sense to me. Don't deny it. You know Katherine is right. That was our quote from last week. And who would have an ego big enough to say something like that except Katherine herself? Don't deny it. You know Katherine is right. That's right. Katherine said it. She was talking to Jill in the 1998 episode. She was commenting on her own idea that Jill should move in with her right into the Chancellor Mansion. She has said, don't deny it, you know Katherine's right. Right to Jill. And about herself. I picked 2 Katherine Chancellor quotes 2 weeks in a row, and I thought to myself, everybody's gonna get this. But no, there were only 4 people who guessed that Katherine said it about Katherine. It was Victoria, Jamie D, Ambreen, and Henry, who also says, nice try, Allie. I know, right? It was a little bit of a trick question. This one I think is going to be hard, but I just can't pass up the opportunity. I like this line. Who said this? This whole episode is just too bizarre. I really hope that you guys have caught it and that you'll be able to guess it, because as soon as I heard it, I was like, clunk. We don't really make reference to episodes. You almost can't make a reference to an episode, since I think we're so much more aware now of episodic television. We're always watching episodes, and we're very aware of what episode number we're on and all that. So this was a fun line to me. This whole episode is just too bizarre. Who said it? And for bonus points, what were they talking about? If you think you know, you can go to yrchat.com to leave your guess. And if you get it right, I will give you your shout out on next week's Y&R Chat. Diana says, the episode with Abby and Tyler has a lot of outdoor shots. We see the ranch, the city buildings, the movie theater, outside, and the police station, to name a few. I enjoyed those. Of course, I noticed that too, Diana. And we had that little scene where people were walking through the crosswalk. That stuck out to me big time from, let's see, that was 2014. I think whoever was writing during that time frame really was doing a great job of showing us the scenes around the city. We had a lot of that cityscape of all of the, with Jabot and Newman Enterprises and the buildings. And they did a lot to establish the scenes during that period. They don't do as much of that today, but yeah, I mean, it was a very striking difference that was unique to that episode. I think 2014 is the newest classic that we've had. I don't think we've gone any further than 2014. I think the oldest one we saw was 81, and the newest one we saw was 2014. And boy, there sure are a lot of differences. But I like seeing those shots of the horses at the ranch. It seemed like one of the exterior shots of the ranch had those pointy, I don't know what you call them, coming off the roof. They're just like a bunch of points coming off the roof. And it was almost as if they were implying that that was Sharon's house, which does not fit with my imagination of Sharon's house at all. It must not be. Must be some other place, because Sharon's house is like a little cottage in the woods with that stained glass window. I mean, that's so distinct. Well, let's see. Speaking of sets, oh boy, that attic. That was so good. And Jamie says, the epic attic fight. The first thing I zeroed in on was that humongous spider. I know that the rat got a lot of attention, but that spider was out of control. It was like a full-blown tarantula in the flippin' Chancellor Mansion. Like, how did Esther completely miss a tarantula? Can you even imagine also them bringing in a tarantula for that scene today? There's just so many little details that I just know that current Y&R would not do. They would never bring in a spider that big. Although I had to ask myself, okay, is that actually a tarantula or is that a littler spider that they zoomed in on? Because I noticed that when there was a pull away shot, there was another spider that was crawling around, and it was extremely small in comparison to, like, I wonder if they filmed it really, really close up and it just looked humongous, because in a further away shot there was a smaller spider. But yeah, I mean, I don't even think there are tarantulas in Wisconsin. I think that's a southern spider, isn't it? I don't know that much about spiders, but it was creepy. It made me uncomfortable. That's all we need to know. Which made you more uncomfortable, though, the spider or the rat? Ooh, that's a really hard choice. And that reminds me that there's a spider in my shower right now that I need to release into the wild. Ooh, I don't know. I don't like either of them. But I loved when Jill said, "Your house has rats." I'm going to guess that Miguel did a better job of keeping the Newman house attic in tip-topper shape than Esther did, because that attic, it did not look good. But I guess that's the purpose of an attic. You're just supposed to be able to shove everything up in there that you don't want to think about for 20 years, and nobody goes through it until you die. That's what attics are for. Oh. Hey, we talked about this last week, but Kamna says the GC Buzz special is a fun watch. There are 2 parts, and they're about 35 to 45 minutes each, and it features every cast member except Eric Braeden, and yes, Melody is there too. And there's been lots of bonus content shared via Y&R's Facebook and Instagram accounts. Yeah, oh my goodness. Okay, well, first of all, I was so glad to see Melody Thomas Scott on the Monday episode, because I had started to get a little nervous about her. But yeah, she was on Monday's episode, and then you said she's in the GC Buzz special. I gotta watch that. Yeah, I mean, everybody's in it. That sounds fun. I did look on Y&R's Facebook page last week maybe, and I did notice that they had a lot of bonus content there, so that's a good place to check in for a little bit of extra Y&R. Hey, another place to check in for a little bit of extra Y&R is Y&R Chat itself. I want to mention again that there are Y&R Chat episodes going back to I think it's 2011 for the podcast and 2008 for the YouTube videos. And this past week, I finished listening to the current Y&R Chat, and I decided, let me play a little roulette here. I'm going to go back into the old podcasts. I never have time to watch videos, but I can listen to a podcast while I'm doing other things. So I went back to the Y&R Chat podcasts, and I saw that one of them had the description, Nikki and Victor's Killer Wedding. And the episode was from the week of March 18th to 22nd, 2013. And I thought, well, that seems interesting considering last week we had Nikki and Victor's 2002 episode. Apparently they had a whole nother wedding after that in 2013, and it was a killer wedding. Now, I won't tell you what that means, because it was actually very interesting to listen to the Y&R Chat episode, because I don't say what that means right off the bat. I pat myself on the back a little bit. I did a pretty good job of building some suspense for future listeners. I wouldn't have known at the time what I was doing, but I thought it was a really cool episode to listen to, because I didn't say what the whole killer wedding thing was until well into the episode. But it was interesting to go back and listen to an old Y&R Chat. I was so clearly had some extra weight on me, because I can tell that I was getting out of breath at certain points during Y&R Chat, so I feel like I made a very good health decision there, losing that weight, and it's really helped make Y&R Chat sound a lot better. But there are so many elements that are still there. I'm listening to it, and I haven't listened to an old Y&R Chat in a long time, but I was doing that this week and thinking, you know what? It's a lot the same. There are some things that are different, but it is a lot the same. And so I thought I'd mention that to you guys. It's the week of March 18th to 22nd, 2013, Nikki and Victor's killer wedding. And there are a lot of interesting tie-ins to things that we're talking about right now. So it would be something good to go back and listen to. I think it was maybe an hour long. If you have iTunes, that's where you can find them. Or I think even if you have Android, the feed is there. Wherever you listen to podcasts, that would be a good place. Or you can go to YouTube to watch the videos. Hey, podcast listeners! When I was going back through these old episodes, I realized that I haven't had any new iTunes reviews in a while. I don't know if anybody still does that. I don't even know if anybody reviews podcasts anymore. But I saw some of the nice comments that people have left me in the past, and that's always just a nice little treat for me to go back and see that. So, hey, if you have a couple spare minutes and you feel like reviewing the Y&R Chat podcast, you could do that on iTunes, and then that's like a little surprise for me that I get to see a nice comment that somebody left. Hopefully it's nice. I think the old Y&R chats are actually not bad. I think I was making it a little bit of a boogeyman in my head because I feel that I've come a long way in terms of how I present things, and I just think Y&R Chat sounds a lot better now, looks a lot better now. I mean, I would hope that I've made some improvements in 12, 13 years, but they're not bad. So I think I'm going to go back and listen to the one, the other episode that I want to listen to this next week is the stable fight episode with Nikki and Sharon, because I'll be interested to hear what my thoughts were on that at the time. And pretty much any of these episodes that we see that are pre-2011, you can go back and listen to a podcast, or if it's pre-2008, you can go back and watch a video Y&R Chat. So, all right, moving on with comments about Nikki and Victor. Last week we had their non-killer wedding episode, and last week I also asked you guys if you were still loving Nikki and Victor, or if you're just totally over the hype. And these poll results aren't real surprising. 66% of you are still loving Nikki and Victor. 34% of you are just over it, feeling like Nikki and Victor are hyped up. I guess I would have maybe expected a little more love for Nikki and Victor, but I also think, we're longtime fans, and we've been through the ringer with these two. So it makes sense to me that a lot of people are just over it by now, but not Astra. Astra says, I love them. And in the 2002 wedding episode, it reminded me of why I always loved them. It was beautiful. The music, the white rose petals, and the montage of their relationship was so great. I admit, over the last few years, the romance of Victor and Nikki hasn't really done it for me, so I've felt kind of meh about them. But now that I remember what they went through, I actually appreciate them being together and being the patriarch and matriarch of the show. We've already seen some of the grandiose romance, so it's nice to see them settle down without any love triangles and pretty much only argue over the children. Yeah, I think that's time. I mean, I personally feel very similar. That it's easy to forget the epic romance because they're not really doing a whole lot of that these days. But I've been saying for a long time. In fact, I was saying in the 2012 Killer episode, I was just hoping that Nikki and Victor would settle down. Anna loves the fighting, though. Anna says, I'm in the minority, and I'm truly happy when Victor and Nikki are split up and or fighting. They've had some good fights, and their wars have been fairly entertaining through the years. It's true. Nikki and Victor are fun when they're fighting, too. Diana says, Eric Braeden is such a great actor. In the episode where Victor has a heart attack, I got teary-eyed as he laid there gasping and trying to ask for help. He makes you feel for him, and his acting is so believable. I know, the way he was kind of making those sounds, hope. I know, it was heartbreaking, right? I think it's because Victor is always Mr. Strong, and then to see him lying on the floor so helpless, that's a hard episode to watch, and I definitely connected in with Eric Braeden there too. Ellen says, I just don't get the appeal of Victor Newman. Never have. These old episodes just remind me of how one-dimensional he always seemed. Yelling, bullying, threats, stringing women along, and discarding them. There have been decent stories for him over the years, but the main theme has been, me big strong man. Eric Braeden could have handled much more nuanced material, getting to the root of his painful childhood, while he has to prove himself best all the time, and why he's never fully trusted anyone, not even Nikki. Of course, she does blab to the kids. But then taking it and incorporating that growth into a better Victor. Oh my, you know what, Ellen? I think you've hit on it here. This is a really good point, because it's almost like it's not so much the appeal of Victor Newman as it is the appeal of Eric Braeden. As Diana said, there's just something about him that makes you interested. But it's like Victor on his own is not a nice guy. He's not a great husband. I mean, cutting off Nikki's bank accounts in that 2014 episode just so that she wouldn't make the mistake or so that Ian Ward couldn't manipulate her. Yeah, it's gross. I mean, there's no doubt about it. There was a lot of chatter at the website this week about, let's just list Victor's sins. There's just, it's a huge book. You could write a book on all of the awful things that Victor has done. I think that the truth is the strength of the Victor Newman character is wholly and completely lies with the strength of Eric Braeden and just what a cool actor he is, what a good actor he is. And he seems like a person who is very different from his character. I really truly believe that Eric Braeden is nothing like that in real life. It's tough because again, it's like I think Y&R has used and abused his characters in a lot of ways to the point where it's hard. It is hard to love him, but I'm biased. 1993, he's my entry point, and I do remember having a very early impression that was just Victor's line of logic, that everybody else in his life didn't appreciate him and everybody else was the problem. And I do think that I tend to favor him because of that, for all of my years moving forward. Yeah. Oh, speaking of my entry point too, those pink ranch walls, Anna says, Allie, you're absolutely right. Nikki designed the ranch after she won it from Victor in the divorce settlement. And it became the pink walls. Yay! Yes! That is exactly what I wanted to know. Thank you so much. That reaffirms me and makes me feel good about my world again. I never would have known the other walls. All I know are the pink ranch walls, and it makes complete sense to me in a way that it never did before. That was Nikki thumbing her nose at Victor a little bit. She said, all right, well, this is my house now, and she painted them walls pink. You go, Nikki. Let's talk about Victor and Jack's feud. Daisy has an interesting perspective here, saying, even though Victor did his share of terrible things, I always thought that it was Jack who started the feud. And I go way back to the beginning. When Jack was walking down the stairway, he overheard John speaking with Victor, praising him for his accomplishments. And Jack looked so jealous that Victor was getting attention from his father. And that's how I thought he's been all this time until they made amends recently. I hope that sticks. Yeah, so it's, I think that our early opinions do also really inform how we see the characters moving forward. But that is interesting that you feel like Jack was the one who threw down the gauntlet with Victor first. Oh, wow. Anna says about Terry Lester, following up on that last week, saying, I believe it's widely known that the reason why Terry Lester left the role of Jack is because he was upset with Laura Lee Bell, who plays Christine. I guess he accused Laura Lee Bell of getting special treatment on the show because of who her parents were. Ooh! Man, and so Terry Lester was on the show enjoying his part, and then all of a sudden Y&R starts to focus on these teen storylines, maybe draw in some younger viewers, and he thinks, why is this girl getting all my screen time? Is it because she's related to the co-creators? Well, I mean, I'm sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, if that's their daughter, I'm sure they probably were giving her preferential treatment. I'm sure she probably was getting a whole lot of focus. I'm sure they saw her as a darling, and they probably wanted to make her the darling of the show. No doubt about it. But that is pretty uncouth to say that, though. I mean, maybe he was just being honest. I probably wouldn't have said it. Ooh. That's some juicy details right there. Anna also says she got to meet Terry Lester, Peter Bergman, and Susan Lucci at the Niagara Falls Convention Center in 1981. My aunt took me to a fan event, and it was great. Terry was my all-time favorite Jack. Aww. Your aunt took you to a fan event in 1981? That's cool. What a cool aunt. Wow. Yeah, I've never been to any fan events. Maybe someday. Not any day soon. But Leslie says, I met Terry Lester in 1988 at the Aladdin in Las Vegas. There was a fan event, but I didn't attend it. My husband was working at the casino and called to tell me that my soap actors were there. So I went over and caught him. And when he was walking down the hall leaving the event, I found out later that the woman he was with was Susan Newman, Paul Newman's daughter. He's my all-time favorite as well, but it's hard to say since Peter Bergman is so great. So I just say all-time favorite soap opera, and it makes me feel like, or soap opera actor, and then it makes me feel like I'm slighting Peter less. Terry just holds a special place in my heart. I think that's how I feel about Eric Braeden. I think he just has that special place in my heart, and I think everybody has that character who holds that special place in your heart, and that's great that Terry was that. Oh, hey, you know what? This is another good thing. You know what? I'm not a Blade fan. I'm not a fan of Blade Bladeson. But Diana says, I enjoyed seeing the actor Michael Tylo, who played Blade Bladeson, Ashley's ex-boyfriend on the show. They made a good-looking couple. I was looking for information on the actor Michael Tylo. He's now 71 years old. Maybe they could bring him back from the dead and reunite him with Ashley. Soaps can do anything, as we know. And I didn't realize that he used to be married to Hunter Tylo, who plays Taylor, Steffi's mom, on The Bold and the Beautiful. Yeah, I knew that, but I forgot it. Yeah, Michael Tylo. You know, they could bring him back, or they could bring the twin back, Rick. I mean, I'd be fine with that. I think he was just, he didn't do anything wrong. I think he was just also of his time, and it wasn't connecting with me. But it's hard. It's like, you know, reconciling how I felt about a character in 93 versus how I feel 30 years later. It's totally different. I mean, I'm sure as a 13-year-old, I'm looking at him going, this guy. But maybe if I saw him today, it would be a totally different story. I do kind of remember him being married to Hunter, though, and I remember seeing them in the soap mags together of the day. Oh, well, characters that are no longer with us. Colleen says, oh my goodness, it's Avery. I love Avery so much. And those glasses. Remember her klutziness? Such a real character and so awesome with Phyllis. Yeah, you know, I think that Phyllis could really use her sister right about now. It's true. Like, it was nice seeing that scene with Avery trying to console Phyllis over the loss of her child. And I also do remember that Avery had that klutziness about her. That was an interesting element of her character. I mean, she was more than just the town lawyer. I think they did a pretty good job of developing her character, and I don't understand why she was cut. Gary says, baking legal eagle Avery is loved by me too. Such a smart, savvy, snazzy presence. Bring her back with glasses. Yes. And Avery had that cooking element to her. So it was obvious that Y&R was trying to give Avery a little extra oomph. She did have some personality. They were trying to develop her as her own character, and I liked her a whole lot too. I wasn't happy when she left, and now that I'm thinking about it, I kind of remember hearing some rumors that maybe part of the reason why Michelle Stafford left the show the last time was because she was a little jealous that Avery's character was getting a little more attention than her. That Phyllis's sister was upstaging Phyllis, and that maybe Michelle Stafford didn't like it. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that is what I heard. Yeah, she was beautiful too. I really did like Avery. Gary also says, remember Daisy, the character that was literally born without a soul. Oh, I have to pause there because I love that description of Daisy, born without a soul. There was something that very vacant about the way that she was portraying, and it was just a very, she was just born evil. I think she was the child of Sheila Carter and Tom Fisher, which is why they were calling Daisy Kevin's sister. So yeah, she was just, she had two evil parents. Of course, she was going to be evil, born without a soul. Oh, that's so good. I love that. Gary also says, it should be said, that was a pretty cool, heavy, intense, heavy metal bracelet piece of goods on Daniel's arm. And he's got a rose tattoo on his other arm. This is the only Daniel I know. He looks a lot more mature than the one that showed up a couple of weeks ago when Danny was explaining his parentage to him. I had the same thought. It was jarring because we just saw this young, fresh-faced Daniel a couple of weeks ago, and now, we're getting dropped into the episode with Daisy. I forgot that Daniel was given big-time alternative vibe. I liked it a lot. Daniel, speaking of men's fashion and the way guys look on the show, it's very similar. It's always the same, but here Daniel was representing an alternative style. Daniel's someone who looks different. I don't think there was anybody else on the show who has tattoos. And I do remember also that he constantly had that big chunky bangle bracelet, like a bunch of them. He was just known for those big chunky bangle bracelets, but it was cool. He had a different vibe than any of the other guys on the show, and I don't know that I ever really appreciated it as much when he was around, but seeing it in retrospect, it was visually a very, very different than what we see for the guys on the show today. Who's the most alternative character on the show guy-wise today? Probably Theo, and Theo wears a suit and a pocket watch, and that's about as alternative as it gets, Yeah, we should bring Daniel back. I wonder what he looks like today. I wonder if he'd be open to coming back on the show. Interesting character. Well, this gets me. Speaking of watching old episodes versus new episodes, Tony says, you might notice, if you watched online, that the minutes of the show are more now, with more minutes of commercial time. I did notice this, Tony, and Superplex chimed in and said, in the 80s, a typical 1-hour daytime drama ran for 44 minutes, when commercial breaks are not included. Today, a typical 1-hour daytime drama only has 36 minutes of programming, and the rest is dedicated to commercial breaks. So Superplex, this is exactly right. 44 minutes is what the runtime used to be. 36 minutes is what it is today. And I was noticing, before I actually made this connection and you gave me the hard numbers there, I was thinking that watching the older episodes, I was feeling more sunk into each episode. I felt more relaxed. It felt longer. It felt like there was more. I felt like I had more time to just be there. And I hadn't placed my finger on it until you gave those hard numbers. But it is absolutely and completely true. So we've shaved off, 12 minutes over the years? That's quite a lot. Because now when I'm watching, I'm fast forwarding through commercials constantly. I noticed too that some of the segments were just longer. So you had a chance to get more story, but also you just had a chance to get more dialogue. There was just more room to breathe in the old days. Whereas now it's like you watch for a couple minutes, fast forward to commercial. Watch for a couple minutes, fast forward to commercial. And then sometimes there's like, your halfway point where you got 2 breaks of the commercial. And it's, I just think that's really, really interesting that we lost show but gained commercial. Sneaky how they did that too. I don't know when it happened exactly, but it must have happened without me noticing it until now. Oh boy. Well, let's end on this comment from TB84, who says, I wish that they could do more of these character tribute weeks for other legendary characters / actors. We had Mrs. C, now Nikki and Victor. Maybe something like Jill, Neil, Ashley, Sharon, Nick, Jack, Tracy. Those characters were on the show for a long time and was played by mostly the same actor. I don't know, maybe that's a stupid idea. What do you think? Oh no, TB84, I don't think that is a stupid idea at all. Oh my gosh, a Tracy theme week? That would be amazing. She is a character who it would just be such a perfect opportunity to highlight her long journey on the show, especially since she was never a Nikki, she never got as much airtime as Nikki. Why not give her that opportunity to have some more airtime now? No, I love this idea. Just zeroing in on specific characters. Sharon, absolutely. Ashley, you could do both, all of the actresses. There was 3 different Ashleys, because Sherry Shattuck also played that role for a while too. So you could show the evolution of the Ashley character. We've had some Neil, some Jack recently, but I think that's a really good idea, just focusing in on some of the characters who are still on the show today and doing a highlight week for them. Oh, I love that. I also thought, to end us up here, maybe I would toss out another question for you guys. Do you have any other theme ideas? So TB84 has given us the idea of a theme week based on characters. I think that's a really good one. Legendary characters. What else would make a good theme for the upcoming classic episode weeks? I think families is a good one. We got the Winters family. We could do one on the Newmans, the Abbotts, and the Williamses. There's so many. And my other thought is, from seeing both Ricky Williams and Ian Ward this week, what about a theme week for villains? I think that would be a fun one too. So let's see. Put your brainstorm cap on. Think about what other themes would be really, really good and juicy to see over the coming weeks, and then go to yrchat.com and give me your ideas for theme weeks that Y&R could and should do as we continue on our journey of the classics. Okay, everybody, that is our Y&R chat for the week. But don't forget, there's so many other Y&R chats from previous weeks. If we're talking classics here, why not go back and watch the companion Y&R chat video, or listen to the companion Y&R chat podcast for the show that we're seeing? I imagine with some of these Winters family episodes, they would have been things that we'd have talked about in Y&R chat too. So there's lots of opportunity to dig back into those archives. You can also go to yrchat.com, dig back into the caption archives, the quote archives, the old chat threads from long ago, previous weeks. There's just a lot of Y&R stuff out there, a lot of Y&R chat content out there too. Okay, so I hope everybody has a really wonderful week, and that you join me again here next Sunday. I love you guys. Bye!